We were looking at the question of racial disparity in police stops in Chicago, and we compared the police stops by race with traffic camera citations by race. And the question has been raised in the U.S. context for a variety of reasons. There's this notion of Black individuals who are driving feel that they're stopped by the police more frequently than whites for the same violations or non-violations. And we wanted to be able to test this in as objective a way as possible. What we're able to do now is, because there's data which estimates the racial composition of each road in the street network, we're able to look and see if, in fact, people are being stopped more frequently than their racial composition on the road. Are Black drivers being stopped more frequently on roads where white drivers are more common, or where Black drivers are more common? Our study found that on a street with 50% Black drivers, the probability of these drivers being stopped was 70%, but the probability of a speed camera ticket issued was only 54%. In contrast, on a street with 50% white drivers, the probability of a white driver being stopped was under 20%, while the probability of a speed camera ticket being issued to a white driver was just under 50%. So there's three major sources of data. The first source of data is police stop data from the city of Chicago. And this has tracked every police stop, every time a police officer pulls over a driver. And a number of characteristics of that stop have been recorded, including the race of the driver. And this data was released by the city of Chicago after being asked by researchers with the Freedom of Information Act. The second set of data is traffic camera data. And so in Chicago, there are a number of speed ticket cameras and red light running cameras. And we know where the owners of vehicles live, and we know what the racial composition of their neighborhoods are. And so that gives us an estimate of the racial composition of the people who were ticketed. And the third source of data is data from a company called Replica, which has developed a simulation of all travel in the city of Chicago, as well as other cities in the U.S. Everyone making a trip is estimated, where their origin is, where their destination is, characteristics about the individual based on their home location and their destination location, and which routes they're taking. And from that, we can make a pretty solid estimate of the racial composition of travelers on each link. In Chicago, the police stop data was released because there have been a number of complaints in Chicago that police are stopping Black drivers more than white drivers. But yeah, the data is not available universally. Many cities don't track police stops by race of the traveler, and if they do, it's not in a comprehensive database. But Chicago's had legal issues in the past, and so that data had to be made public. Well, my belief would be that the general trend is probably true across large northern cities in the United States, perhaps southern cities as well, that there's probably a consistent evidence for police stops being racially disproportionate to violations. But we haven't had data about the racial composition of actual violations previously. And so that's something that allows us to sort of put down one of the excuses that might be used. So police officers might say, yes, we're pulling these people over more often, but they're violating more often. And if the violations from cameras are objective and representative, then they're not violating nearly as often as they're being pulled over. You want to be able to compare the actual violation rates with the amount of times that they're being pulled over for suspected violations. And that's something that we could do with this study that hasn't been possible previously. As a researcher, we want to be able to say that, information is sort of the first step towards a solution. Ultimately, if we can, this along with other efforts, along with the people who made sure that this information was available in the first place, want to be able to provide support for changes in policy.